Good afternoon, everyone, as Alyssa said, or good morning, good evening, depending on where you are. Welcome to today's session brought to you by PRA Communications and IR Labs. I'm Joy. I am the PR and Communications Strategist here at IR Labs, and I will also be your moderator. Apologies for this session today. So for the session, of course, we'll be discussing the very evolving and nuanced world of media relations, and particularly how it pertains to capital markets. Leading the discussion today, we have someone who I've had the deep privilege of working closely with, Alyssa Berry, the principal and co-founder of IR Labs, as well as Robert Simpson, president and CEO of PRA Communications. So both Alyssa and Robert, of course, bring a wealth of knowledge and experience in both communications and capital markets. So all the strategies and insights they're going to share with us today are, of course, going to be invaluable. But before we get into it, just a few housekeeping items. Today's session is being recorded, and a link to the recording will be shared with all the participants following the session. So if you missed anything or you want to revisit a certain part of the conversation, you'll have the opportunity to do so. Secondly, of course, we invite all the audience to participate. So feel free to send any questions or comments you have in the chat, and we'll do our best to address them at the end of this session. And before we jump right in here, I just really like to take a moment to highlight the significance of a partnership between PRA Communications and IR Labs. And, I've been speaking to Alyssa and Robert, and I think I can attest for all three of us here to the fact that it's collaborations like the one that we have going here that really move the needle forward in the world of communications and ultimately help us reach that goal of enhancing our ability to really deliver exceptional service to our clients. So with that said, thank you, Alyssa and Robert, for being here.
Pleasure.
Thanks, Joy. Okay, yes, so we will jump right in here. So as we've mentioned, media relations plays a critical role in securing funding, visibility, of course, gaining credibility for startups and, more established companies alike. However, what we've noticed is that it's also an area that is often untapped or misunderstood or misused. So to start, Alyssa, if you could kick us off by telling us a little bit about the partnership with PRA Communications, as well as your experience with media relations in capital markets.
Well, thanks so much, Joy, and thank you to all of our guests for being here. Robert, thank you for this opportunity. I've been really excited to chat with you today and learn from you as well. I think just it's important to emphasize the significance of a partnership like this with another agency. Robert and his team specializing in communications in the mining and resource space, and IR Labs being focused on investor relations. And partnerships like this allow us to add so much more value to our clients and being able to collaborate on projects together. It is also challenging to identify exceptional talent, and I think between our two teams, we've got just that, really great teams that can work together to support the work of our clients. The capital markets space, and we'll dive into this over the next little bit here, it has evolved so much, and then you've got the media relations space that is just evolved so much as well. And I think one of the important things to start off in this discussion is making sure that you've got the right messaging and you're packaged up for the media. We have the privilege of working with many publicly traded companies in many different sectors. And if that is something that is just not packaged up perfectly at the outset, media becomes really challenging. And we have the good fortune of having an incredible team and the collaboration with Robert's team to make sure that messaging is tight and that we are putting our best foot forward whenever we're heading out and having discussions with the media. Robert, I'd love to pass it over to you, and I know we'll dive into some examples as we get going here as well.
Yeah, well, thank you, Alyssa, I echo what you said about the partnership. I think, as you said, it's always good and difficult these days to find good partners to work with, and I feel like we have a great partnership here. And I am looking forward to seeing where our partnership leads. I think your team and your history in the capital markets definitely speaks for itself, and that's why we're excited to be working with you. On our side of things, when we start talking about media, less so about financial media and more so media in terms of reputation management and delivering your message so that you're building your reputation over time. And of course, that requires some interesting approaches. It's an approach that takes time. And I think one of the things that is most important for people to understand when it comes to media relations is that what you need to have is you need to have news. And you need to have something that is, I mean, quite simply, if you think about media, take the S off news and it's new. And so from our perspective, always looking for those things that are new and are unique and perhaps unique to you, and something that might surprise you is often a place where we can start. And it's kind of a starting point for what we would say is the beginning of a media relations plan. And so I'll stop there. I know we're going to get into that a little bit later. But as you did say, Alyssa, the media environment these days is has changed, and I think in many ways it has made it more difficult to do the work that we're often asked to do on the media relations side.
And Robert, the one thing, especially when it comes to capital markets, and I'm putting my investor relations hat on, we have a responsibility of helping our companies, our issuers, connect and build trust with the investment community more broadly. And maybe just, I'm kind of throwing a question at you. When you're looking at media relations and that connection to building trust, and I think perhaps you just said it in terms of making sure you've got something that's newsworthy, but can you elaborate on that in particular? How do we make sure that our publicly traded companies in particular are, through their media relations efforts, building trust with the broader community?
I think trust starts with management, and I mean the first thing is who is the management team? What is the management team? I mean, what's their track record? And that's where we start building trust. Is who's the team? And that's probably the first place. And who does the team know? And what has the team done in the past? And so that's a good place to start building trust. Second comes really in doing what you say you're going to do. And with media, often you may not get the news the first time round. You may not get it the second time round. But if you are consistent and you consistently do what you say you're going to do, media take notice. And so often it's about building that relationship with the journalist. And like I said, you might not get a headline the first time around. You might not get a headline the second time around. But if you keep at it, if you're consistent, and if you consistently are showing the journalist that, the last time I called you, we said we were going to do this. We've done this. Now I'm telling you we're going to do this, and we've done that. I think it's consistency over time to build trust.
And Robert, I'd love to get a little practical for a second. So I'm
Sure.
going to come up with an example here where we've got a new client, regardless of the industry or sector they're in. One of the first things, just going back to my initial comments, we want to make sure that we understand the story, that the story is resonating. Sometimes we get clients where are you an AI company, or are you, like, what exactly are you? And a lot of those discussions with our clients, once we work through things like a pitch deck, which is, of course, that critical element for the publicly traded companies. Sometimes we're helping with strategy and figuring out, what's our go-to-market, what are the growth objectives, etc. So that's, for us, one of the first things we want to do is to make sure that we understand the story, that the messaging is really tight, it's not confusing to all of the various stakeholders, including investors, but factoring in all of the other customers and others that would be included in that. How are you looking at a mandate when a company comes to you? We've packaged them up really nicely. The messaging is really tight. How do you kick off that media relations engagement?
Yeah, I think the first thing we do is we say, who's your audience? Who is it that you want to speak to, and why do you want to speak to them, and what do you want them to do as a result of that? I mean, when you think of a media story, it's if you get a media story in the Globe and Mail, you're going to get, probably about 60,000 eyes on your story. That's a lot of investor meetings. So the question is what audience do you want? Why do you want them, and what you want them to do? And so once we answer that question, then we can start shaping the story. And I think when you talk about, often finance and capital markets, it really comes down to answering one question, and that is, what are you doing that is unique? And what are you doing that is going to make money? And then how are you going to do that? And if you can answer that who, what, where, when, and why questions, I think you're well on your way to crafting your story. And I'll throw a question back to you, Alyssa, as well. I mean, I'm not as familiar with capital markets as you are, but I would say that capital markets have their own set of challenges in that there's a lot of people competing for space in those financial markets and in those capital markets. So, when you are working with a startup or you're working with a company that is fairly new, I mean, what are you doing to break through all that noise? Because it is a very challenging space to get noticed in.
It absolutely is. And we can't be sharing material non-public information or tipping the media either, right? So, and you and I both know that, and Joy, who does a fabulous job of coordinating all of our exclusives for our clients, everybody wants that exclusive. And you said it perfectly. What they want it to be a new piece of news. They don't want it to be last week's piece of news that you're asking them to write about. So layer that on. And I think that's where we do a lot of work in positioning our CEOs or their spokes people as thought leaders, and ensuring that, as we all know, the media does not want something self-promotional. So how do we make sure that we give the media something that's relevant and timely? There is no secret sauce other than, as you said, it's nurturing those relationships and then finding those opportunities in various sectors of our clients where there is a really hot topic, and figuring out how can we position our CEO rather immediately, because that won't be a hot topic next week. It's a hot topic this week. How do we make sure that we give the media some talking points or some feed them a bit of a carrot on how our CEO can be a really good spokesperson on that topic? Handling the material non-public information pieces, I think, really important to emphasize. And as IROs, I know it's something that we're always sensitive to, that also requires some education to the board and management team on understanding that if we have a press release with something absolutely groundbreaking, and this would be the perfect opportunity to get a Bloomberg coverage, for example, we will build that relationship with that Bloomberg reporter well in advance, and need to educate management that, look, if we can get that reporter to break that news even 1 hour before that press release goes out, before market hours, respecting the regulatory framework that we have to work in, that can be a really great opportunity. And that's really all that reporter wants, is just a little bit of a lead time to be able to be the one to share that news. And in my experience, when you're working with outlets such as Bloomberg and Forbes and the Globe and Mail and all of our sort of Wall Street Journal top tier financial media, they're very well versed in how to navigate this space. But like I said, it really does require some education with management and board to get them comfortable with our expertise and being able to roll out a strategy like that.
I actually have a question here. Robert, I'm going to throw it to you, but Alyssa, feel free to of course, hop in if you have anything to add here too. But Robert, what I try to do sometimes when I don't have evergreen news for our clients, but of course, pitching is part of our mandate, and, getting them press coverage is something that they're looking for. So what I try to do is, of course, what I should be doing, which is keeping, my ear to the ground, researching, keeping up with trends, local as well as national news, and of course, industry news. So with that being said, do you have any strategies or tactics that you employ that have been successful for using national news or local news, and of course, industry news, to gain coverage for your clients, and how do you go about doing that?
Yeah, I think there's, when you were asking the question, I was thinking the answer, but I think a couple things, and Alyssa mentioned this as well. It's about relationships often, and one of the things is having those relationships with those journalists that start reaching out to you. After a while, they come to trust your sources in some cases. So it's developing that relationship. That's one of the things, is developing that relationship. So journalists start calling you and saying, "I'm working on this story. Do you have anyone that you could recommend?" Because we work specifically in one space, the mining space. For us, those journalists, they call us because they know we have those contacts in that space. So that's one thing, is sort of cultivating those relationships with journalists where they come to depend on you as a source or providing a source. The other piece of it is exactly as you mentioned, it's really keeping up on what's going on, and looking at those trends and saying, okay, do I have someone that can speak to this trend, or do I have someone that can speak to this issue? And then connecting with journalists to help them source out those people. I mean, journalists are always looking for sources, and so one of the things is being helpful and making sure that they can rely on you as a source. And so I'd say those are two things, and then I would add one more, which is really sort of predictive, and being predictive of trends as well, and being trend setting in some cases. And so seeing something and then being able to be predictive of what would potentially or possibly be next, or even setting the pace or setting that trend by getting in touch with journalists and saying, listen, I know you've been covering this, but logically and predictively, I believe this is going to happen. So I've got people that can help you create that story. So being predictive, I think, is and that is really just understanding trends and being able to predict trends.
Right. So go ahead, Alyssa.
No, go ahead, Joy.
So from what I'm hearing from you, and what me and Alyssa and the whole team at IR Labs focus on a lot, is getting our C-suite executives ready to be thought leaders, right? So you can go to these reporters, and when you don't have fresh news, you can at least provide those insights. So would you say that, so I guess, I don't want to drag this part of the conversation on too long, but I'm going to throw it back out there. Like, do you have any quick strategies that you use for getting, these executives ready to be thought leaders, right? And speak on topics within their industry and news within their industry?
Yeah, I'm gonna send this back to Alyssa in a second here, but I think the key thing is making sure that thought leader is actually thought leader. And what I see often happen is I see a lot of CEOs and a lot of people putting out information that isn't new. And what it is it's regurgitated information, or it's opinion information. And if you're actually going to be a thought leader, what you need to be doing is you need to be putting out new information, and you have to be thinking like a journalist. You have to be putting out information that nobody has put out before, and that's what makes you the leader. And if that's not happening, then your thought leader is not the leader, and they're not going to be new, and they're not going to be news. And that's the challenge. And so anybody that's working in thought leadership has to have sort of that predictive. They have to put some things out there. Sometimes they have to go. Your CEO has to be willing to take some risks, and if that's happening, you're more likely to get noticed than someone that is simply regurgitating something that's already happened, or commenting on something that's already happened. And I'm going to throw that back to Alyssa, because I don't know how you do it in the capital market, but you still have to be a thought leader for sure. You have to be a leader.
Yeah, those are all really great points. And again, I think we face the challenges around making opinions that maybe aren't already disclosed in other places. So we have to navigate that very carefully. But that's why I think the role that, whether you're an agency or in-house IRO, there's an opportunity to really educate your management team. And I think, and board, I think there's an opportunity to show them what that looks like. So sitting with our CEOs and asking them some really tough questions, or even just opening it up. What's on your mind these days? And what's important to you? Taking that away and helping them, maybe it wouldn't be, 100% perfect in their voice or in their opinion, but taking that away to present to them, here, based on what I heard, this is what this could look like. And I find with a lot of the C-suite, they need to see, sure, that sounds good. You know, maybe I can be convinced that I can be a thought leader, but what does that look like? And helping to illustrate that, I think is really important.
The other piece is staying a thought leader. And that's
Yes.
the challenge is that what from my experience, what I've seen is lots of people start out to be thought leaders, but then slowly disappear because it's hard work. It's hard work being a thought leader because as soon as you lead, as soon as you put something out there, somebody else will put something out. So it's a bit of a competitive arena to be in as well. And I see a lot of CEOs. I mean, time is of the essence for them. So so remaining a thought leader can be difficult as well. And so I think one of the things that I've seen is that you need to sit down with the CEO at the beginning stage and say, this is not, you know, a 1 or 2 month exercise. This is a long-term exercise, and as long as we're working together, it's an ongoing exercise. If you continue to want to be profiled in the media using thought leadership, I'll add that as a caveat.
I think that's such a great point, and that brings me back to the piece about, well, how the heck do you actually nurture relationships, which I'm sure a lot of people are wondering, who are dialed in here. And you know, part of that is positioning yourself as a thought leader, but then there's the engagement side. So as soon as I'm thinking about LinkedIn, for example, as soon as you put out there your comments or your written pieces, there's the other piece of it that comes along with the engagement. Because why are we're not doing it just to put it out there. We're doing it for you know, for a actual strategic. Usually there's a call to action of some sort, which is, I would like to expand my customer base. I want to expand my investors. I want to attract the media, as we're discussing here, to approach me on my various thoughts. So carving out that time to actually nurture. And one of the things that has actually worked out really well for us is whenever we've got a breaking piece of news, we'll always give those to the extent that we can get that top tier media coverage. That's always a nice win. There's building relationships with local and trade media that we've done a really good job at over the last few years, where there may be a piece that is probably going to go to the Globe and Mail this time, but the next time that piece of news, that reporter at the Globe and Mail is not going to be interested. We know that they've already covered us. It's an opportunity to take that piece and give it to another publication. And I'd go so far as, I know Joy and I and our team, we have direct relationships with the media through our LinkedIn. I know over the holidays, we were exchanging happy holidays messages with our media contacts, and you know, they appreciate and it keeps us front and center. They appreciate that we're trying to build that relationship. So it literally is finding someone and telling them, you know, great piece, how can we improve next time? What else are you interested in? How can I help you? I always say the how can I help you is the way that we've built a lot of really outstanding relationships with the media.
And I'll just add one very quick comment to that is I think the biggest mistake that people make is they don't understand the media well enough. And if you're trying to connect with media to do a story, make sure it's a media that covers you or covers your sector or has some interest in your sector. As a former journalist, I think probably one of the most frustrating things is getting calls from people that want you to write a story about them, and it's not in your beat at all, and it just clearly illustrates to you that the person that's calling you hasn't done their homework, and that's not the way you begin and build a relationship. So do your homework, make sure you know who you're speaking to and why you're speaking to them.
Yeah, and Robert, to echo what you're saying, I think something that we hold very true at IR Labs is, you know, we don't take a quantity approach. We try to take more of a quality approach. We've seen more success, you know, pitching out to 3 or 4 media versus pitching out to 40, right? Where even if they do cover your beat, right, the nuances of the story that you're maybe pitching to them or whatever it may be doesn't fully pertain to them. And we know, we've seen like newsrooms, we'll get into it, but newsrooms are taking cuts, and funding is limited, resources are limited. So the more I guess accurate you are when you reach out to media, the more they'll appreciate that, and you can actually be a partner to them. So yeah, that's definitely something that we've seen for sure.
And I'll just add that the more resources you can provide as well, if you've got a photo library, if you've got fact sheets, if you've got backgrounders, and most importantly, you've got spokespeople that are willing, able, and quickly, can step up quickly. I think one of the things that I've run into in the past is executives putting out a news release and then hopping on a plane to go on a fundraising trip, and then they're not available to speak to the media as a result of the news release. So that's making sure that your people are accessible and ready and prepared and have messaging goes a long way as well, because I mean, if you're building a reputation with a journalist, they're also measuring you by how well your client is prepared to do the work for them as well.
Robert, how many times have you had a CEO say, that's great, but tell them I'm not available till next week? Oh, that's the worst.
Yeah. Or like I said, a CEO, they put out a great news release and they all hop on a plane to New York and aren't available to take media calls, and they want to know why they didn't get any coverage. So again, I think it's the whole picture. I mean, how prepared is your client as well? And I mean, I think you probably know this as well, Alyssa. I mean, there's a lot of journalists that will call you afterwards and say, that was great. They came prepared, they came with answers, they came with information, and they knew what the purpose of this interview was. And chances are the next time you call that journalist, they're more likely to at least consider what it is that you're asking them to do.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, so touching on some of the things that we've been speaking about here, I think what would be really interesting to get into is the specifics around how the current media landscape is changing. There's this argument that I see coming up over and over again that the digital age has democratized the journalistic process, right? So we see that with the rise of a lot of consumption of information being consumed through, YouTube and social media platforms and specific influential figures. And then you add to that the layer of journalism changing because when you factor in AI, right? And there's concerns around job allocation, but of course also the quality of journalism. So it would be great to unpack the different ways that we see media shifting, and of course the impact of AI in the space. So Robert, I'm going to let you lead us in our discussion here.
I was hoping that was going to be Alyssa on this one. Well, you know what? I mean, I come from the old days of pre-fax machine media, so still ticker tape media. And you're absolutely right. The media landscape has changed, as has all landscapes, really. If you think about it from all industry, the internet has played a significant role in how we collect and gather information. But I also want to emphasize that there are a lot of new opportunities as well. So perhaps mainstream media being, the headline in the National Post or the Wall Street Journal. Yes, it's becoming more and more difficult to get those because there are less and less media outlets like that. However, I'm also seeing that the internet and AI, to answer your question on AI, are opening up new opportunities. And I think the key will be is recognizing those opportunities and capitalizing on those opportunities. So, LinkedIn, YouTube, even now we're seeing more more on TikTok. We're seeing more on other types of social media. But I think there's going to be an opportunity to be much more creative in the very near future with AI. And I think AI is going to open up a whole new opportunity for media and for media relations.
Right.
I think just to build on your comments, Robert, I know your team does an exceptional job of this too, where we always say, what's the outcome that you want to achieve? So for often we get companies coming to us saying, I just want media coverage. Well, why? And what's the call to action? So I'm going to put, again, my investor relations hat on, and my clients specifically, they want to attract as many retail investors as possible. So we've been able to get, I actually had a call last week from a retail investor who I had no idea that they ended up buying the stock, which is a very frustrating part about measuring success in investor relations. But they had read an article that we got in Financial Post about a year and a half ago. It was a beautiful, I think, 3 or 4 page spread that they did on our company, and we had positioned the company as a leader in this industry, and we're very lucky to be able to get this coverage. Now, that's a great win, and I'm guessing if one person bought the stock, perhaps there are a few others out there that I will never know about. But the other side of it is, and going back to your comment, there are so many other ways to get in front of leveraging, I'll call it new age media, to get in front of our retail investors, institutions, and other players in the investment space. So we've got a lot of relationships in our network where some of them are paid, some of them are earned, where our clients can come on to a podcast or YouTube show, for example, and share their story. And often these podcast hosts, they also don't want it to be the deck that we're flipping through. They don't necessarily want it to be self-promotional. They want to know, why are you a leader in the crypto space, for example, or in cannabis, or whatever the sector may be. And I find that is a really great way to get our clients exceptional visibility, and it's actually measurable as well, because we can see views, we can get certain metrics in terms of viewership through those opportunities. And then I would love to talk a little bit about paid media. We are seeing really great success for our clients in paid media as well, but with some reservation, because clients, of course, first and foremost, there's nothing like getting a story in the Globe and Mail or the Wall Street Journal. But if we don't actually have a story, and there isn't something that is enticing that reporter, how do we make sure that we're leveraging paid media to get some visibility? I'd love to understand how you're leveraging paid for your clients.
Yeah, we certainly use paid media as part of the mix when we look at a media relations campaign, and the paid media really is to reach those target sectors that we're unable to reach with earned media, and usually we would find that sometimes that's more in the trades and more in the for our clients, it's more on the trade media side that we'll often look at paid. We're leveraging it there. We're also leveraging it now somewhat on social media as well. We're certainly leveraging, and you can include this in paid, is when you're boosting LinkedIn posts, when you're boosting your posts. I think that now could be considered paid media to a certain extent as well. So we're certainly leveraging it there as well. And then, of course, with YouTube and developing video and sort of making sure that it's getting boosted and that it's getting additional eyes on it. So those would be the places that we would use it most. And we sort of use it often. I'd hazard to say as a last resort. If we are unable to get earned media, let's get some paid, and let's see if we can get you some coverage, so that at least your name starts to get a little bit noticed, and we can start building your reputation.
Yeah, absolutely. And the other piece for us is owned media. We're spending a lot of time with our clients, really helping to create articles or thought pieces that they can put out through their own channels, newsletters, distribution lists, databases, boosting those as well. So we're finding that owned is another really great channel, and that owned has actually led to the earned, because they're seeing that, okay, maybe this is something we need to pay attention to. It's running on radar screens. The other piece that we've seen recently a lot of success with are white papers. So coming up with, and this doesn't mean necessarily a 30-page detailed technical report, but coming up with a really cool thought piece that has some wonderful infographics that can be downloadable, that is ultimately driving traffic to someone's website. I'd love to understand what you're doing in the owned media space as well.
Yeah, same as you. It's really content is king. So, if we think we've got a great story and nobody else, the mainstream media don't think we've got a good story, and a number of people on our team are former journalists, we'll put it together and we'll put it together. We'll see if we can get it noticed. Using the social media channels, and even flipping it to our journalist contacts, saying, "Hey, here's a great story we've written." You're right. If it has merit, it will get noticed, and it may lead to some earned media. And we are seeing, I mean, journalists. I think I saw some stats that we were sharing here. Journalists, I think their newsrooms are down to like 13% of what they were 10 years ago. So journalists' time is pretty precious these days as well. And if we can help them, as you said before, Alyssa, that's what we aim to do. Not that they're going to take that story and run it verbatim, but it does give them an opportunity to do some research and maybe pick it up from there. So owned media is also something that I think is incredibly important.
Absolutely. So with what you just said, Robert, what I'd love to get into is how can PR practitioners be a credible and useful partner to journalists? So we've, of course, touched upon it throughout the session, but I guess specific things to highlight, do's and don'ts, what is newsworthy, how do we effectively pitch, what should follow-ups look like, right? And kind of the nuances there. So I'm just going to hand it to whoever, either Alyssa or Robert, to kick us off.
Go ahead, Alyssa. I've been talking a lot.
I'm learning so much from you today, Robert. I think at the end of the day, it's just being a good partner with the media, being responsive, putting really good information in front of them, stories that they can get excited about, that they're going to look good to their editors, moving quickly, responding fast, and being able to have the ability to educate our clients on how to prep accordingly before they hop on those calls or those virtuals. And I know as Robert and I, we feel the pain from time to time of tracking down our CEOs to say, look, you need to be available, and following through with that. I think it's just to me, those are things that are common sense, but I go back to a lot of the work that we do really is an education process for CEOs and boards if they haven't navigated the world of media before, and making sure that they're prepared to put in the time and commitment for a successful campaign.
Yeah, I'll echo that, and I'll just say media training. Make sure that you've spent some time working with your CEOs and making sure that they have been media trained. So one, not only do they understand how the media operates, but they understand their role, and they understand the importance of their role, and they are effective, and they arrive at the interview prepared. They're able to be professional during the interview, and they're able to provide valuable information to the journalist. They don't step outside the bounds. They don't get themselves in trouble, which then comes back to you, and you spend your time managing issues rather than looking for headlines. And one other thing that I would add is making sure that your journalists and what it is that they're looking for. And the better you can be at that, and the more conversations you can have with your journalists, perhaps on a personal or professional level, maybe over a beer or over a coffee, understanding what their day looks like and getting to know them, the more successful you will be.
And I think also, as much as we can help control the process, and what I mean by that is when we do get a really great media win, we all get really excited that the journalist or the reporter is intrigued, making sure that we see it right through. And rather than saying, okay, I'm copying Bob, my CEO, into the call, or into the email chain and letting it run. It's making sure that the call's set up, following up with the reporter, perhaps even being on that call to take notes and to be able to have a call with the reporter on the heels of that. Do you need any photos? When are you running it? And being able to really handhold through the entire process, whether you're working with an agency or managing this process in-house. Those are a few other pieces of practical advice I would provide.
So I'm going to throw out a few statistics that we saw from Cision's 2023 State of the Media report. So what we saw was about 76% of journalists said that they are likely to block someone if they're receiving irrelevant pitches or they're getting too many follow-up emails with regards to a pitch. We saw about over 65% say that they highly value data within pitches. And we kind of continuously see that need for data over and over again. And then we surprisingly saw 57% of journalists say that they find the majority of the pitches that they're getting irrelevant. So with that, my question is, how do we do our role as PR practitioners in providing, in actually being resourceful and useful partners to journalists, but also then acknowledging the fact that, we have mandates and clients have expectations. And sometimes, within that mandate, a lot of it is to get media coverage and to pitch out. So how do we kind of balance those two things?
Well, I think, first of all, follow the journalists and read what the journalists are writing that you want to pitch, and know what they write. And secondly, don't overpromise and underdeliver. And I think that often happens in media relations, as we see. I know that we have a lot of clients that come to us disappointed with their previous firm because they felt as though they didn't get the media coverage that they were promised. And I think that it behooves you as a professional to remind your clients that getting media is a privilege. It's not something that just happens because I'm a good pitcher or because I'm a great agency. It's a privilege because you're doing something that is different from everyone else and that is new and is something that people should or want to learn about. And so within those parameters, I think it's important that they understand that what you're doing for them is something that you don't get a Globe and Mail story every day, and when you do, you get it on merit. So if you don't have anything for me that is going to be is going to get me a Globe and Mail story, I'm not going to promise that I'm going to try and do that for you. What I can do is I can make some calls. So I think it's often we see agencies overpromising and then unfortunately under-delivering. So I'll leave that. I'll throw that over to Alyssa to follow up on.
I agree with all those points, and I would say just getting kind of practical, like testing those pitches and make sure run them by a colleague. And I know everyone is busy running a million miles an hour. If there's a really great data point in there, highlighting that in yellow, bolding it so that piece pops. I'm a really big fan of how pitches are formatted, and what kind of imagery can be embedded to help the reporter understand that this could be something a little bit bigger. It's the same way that we all consume media or information in this very fast-paced world. To the extent that we can try and catch their eye in that pitch is a huge opportunity that you don't want to overlook.
And I'd add, speaking the same language. I mean, in our business, because we work in the mining industry, it's a very technical industry. And so often, often where the news lies is in the technology or the technical language. So taking that language, translating it so that it's easily understood, maybe translating the science to about a grade 6 level so it's easily understood, and then providing relevance to that as well. Why is this relevant, and what is this going to do, or what is this going to change? I think that also helps, particularly in your pitches. I think pitching drill results is something that I was always interested in as a journalist, because people would send me their drill results and it meant nothing to me. But if you would have put it into context that this is actually good, perhaps I would have taken a good look at it. So that's a good example from my side.
I love that.
Right, so that's a good transition to what's probably going to come to the end of our session, but that's a good transition to numbers, right? And financial storytelling and storytelling with data and with numbers. And it's truly an art, because what we're trying to do with that is we're trying to make statistics and maybe information that is not the most digestible to people who are not, well-seasoned experts within that field, and making it truly understandable and enticing. So with that, Alyssa, I'm going to get you to start us off here. What strategies would you say are helpful to employ to make sure that journalists are able to accurately interpret data and certain financial figures accurately, of course?
Yeah, I think a lot of what we've said, just keeping it really practical. I love your comment, Robert, about even highlighting, this is significant because, and answering the because, I think is pretty critical as well. And like I said, just trialing the pitches on a few friendlies, and learning that, if you're going to go out to everybody with the same pitch, but maybe it doesn't fall properly, it's really hard to go back and redo that. I'm a really big fan of data and information, and as much as you can package up on a silver platter for the media, I think is perfect. And I think there's a huge opportunity in following the different journalists, even if you're not trying to pitch a particular client, following their work and saying, I love what you're writing about right now, as it relates to climate change. I have, giving them a nice compliment about their piece of work, and then maybe adding in something like, I've got, a really interesting client that might have something here down the road, and then just starting to build those relationships. Those are just probably my closing thoughts on that question.
And I'll just add one more visual communication. For a lot, particularly on the financial side or on the statistics side, if you can provide some visual communication that supports what it is that you're trying to say. I mean, remembering that 60% of the population are visual learners, and journalists being part of that population, it helps. A graph helps, or a great visual helps understand what it is that you're trying to say as well.
Absolutely. So with all of that being said, I want to thank Alyssa and Robert. We're coming to the end of our session here, but I want to thank both of you for sharing your insights and your strategies. And I think storytelling, all three of us know this, and probably many people on the call here. So storytelling is a craft, but I think financial storytelling and statistical storytelling, I think that brings in a whole other level of finesse, right? To take these complex concepts and make them digestible and enticing. So thank you both with that. So with that, I'm going to open up the floor to any questions. So feel free to type in any questions into that chat.
Joy, I see a question here. I think this is a really good one around reporters often looking for a story where they have a particular angle, and perhaps we don't want management necessarily being the one commenting, or they're looking for something a little bit controversial. I'd love to get Robert's thoughts on how he manages this, but I know for us it is critical to be vetting every opportunity. We go through a list of questions without making it sound too academic, but around what's the angle, who else are you speaking to in the space? Because we don't want our clients to end up in the same article necessarily of a peer of ours, or maybe we do, but let's understand why. And understanding as much as possible. And I find that a really good journalist and a reporter is going to be very transparent about their angle, because the last thing they want is for to cause a really challenging and frustrating situation. Now, I know we've all probably had clients where our executives go, well, that was a terrible story, because all the things that they felt that were wonderful that they said were never captured. So I think we have a responsibility of making sure that our spokespeople are prepped for those conversations, and that their key messages are reinforced as well. But Robert, any comments on how to handle the unwanted stories?
Well, I think there's always going to be those stories that are unwanted, but I think the key thing to remember is if your voice is not in the story, somebody else's is going to be. So if it is a story that is reflective of you and your reputation, or if it's a story about your company, if you're not talking, somebody else is going to be. So from our perspective, often it's about understanding the angle, as Alyssa said, but it's also about making sure that you have an opportunity to express your point of view, and hopefully that point of view will be reflected in the story. And usually it is to a certain extent. But like I said, if you're not talking, somebody else will talk for you. And if it's something that's on a more is going to be on a more negative side, I think it's often better for the spokesperson or the company to be talking than someone else talking for them. So it's sometimes a bit of a balancing, but we don't recommend no comment. We usually recommend having an opportunity to protect your reputation for sure.
So the next question we have here is earned media sources either consolidating or even going away. How much of a threat to our media relations activity is it? Do we put more effort into paid and socials?
Yeah, so definitely, I think we covered that one well in our discussion. I think having a blend of both. And I putting my investor relations hat on, when you're meeting with investors and they're going to Google you, they're going to probably just type your company into the search engine. If your website is not optimized, they might actually have to scroll down a little bit, but they're going to look to see if the media is talking about you and what's being said out there. So I think that's where paid can play a purpose, especially if you're going to be gearing up for a capital raise, and really wanting to get the story out there and creating a little bit of that FOMO. That's sort of my view on paid. I think there's nothing better than getting those endorsements without having to write the checks, but definitely there's a place for it.
And I think you also have to consider when you're putting together your media strategy, return on investment. And so, I mean, if you think about pitching the Wall Street Journal, the circulation of the Wall Street Journal is 3,700,000 people. And those 3,700,000 people that read the Wall Street Journal probably are financial or have some financial purpose for reading the Wall Street Journal. So what's the investment that you're going to put into getting that story in the Wall Street Journal? And then what's the ROI on that? So when you think about your mix, yes, there's probably less mainstream media. But again, mainstream media still has a very broad reach in target audiences versus social media in some cases. So like I said, the Wall Street Journal will get you 3.7 million. I guess you'll get double the eyes on that, but in some cases, but nevertheless, there is an ROI on that, which is measurable. And so what's the effort you want to put into that? So if you've got a budget and you're sitting down, you're working on your media relations budget, consider the ROI before you just completely, maybe say, I'm not going to work with mainstream, I'm going to work with social or paid. Paid probably won't get the 3.7 million eyes on it that earned will.
Absolutely.
So closing up here with the last question, could you highlight any major challenges you faced this year while securing earned media coverage?
Oh boy,
well, yeah. I think there's all kinds of challenges. I'll jump in. I just think, one is time, journalist time. I think probably the biggest challenges these days are the 24-hour news cycle. I think there's a lot going on, and journalists are required, to cover a lot of different. There's no specialists anymore. In our business, in the mining industry, we used to have specialist journalists. In the Wall Street Journal, we used to have a New York Times specialist journalist, the Globe and Mail. We just don't have those anymore. So, our journalists that used to be only covering our sector are now covering Lucy the elephant at the zoo having a baby, you know, an accident on the 401 in Toronto, and maybe another mishap somewhere, and then we're calling them with some news around ESG numbers. So I think time is really the biggest challenge that we're finding, even in the trades and even on social. Time is the biggest issue.
Yeah, I agree. I would just I think big challenge for us is just that education and setting expectations with our clients. That's always tricky. And you just made a really good point. I love social media. It's not always our first go-to, but if you're going to navigate that world, it does mean investment in things like video. You know, spending a ton of time on one post that's a little bit static isn't really going to move the needle. So now you've got to invest even more time and resources to making sure that that platform is going to be optimized for your strategy.
Yeah, and social's become extremely competitive and creative. So you're right. I mean, you've got to be on top of your creative game as well as your media relations game.
Absolutely.
Okay, well, with that being said, I think we're going to close off today's session. Thank you to everyone who joined us today. As I said at the beginning of the session, we will be sending out an email with the link to our discussion, and as well as the contact information for myself, Robert, and Alyssa, should you have any questions or remarks after our discussion today. As well, feel free to reach out to us on LinkedIn, and we'd be happy to connect with you there as well. So thank you, Robert and Alyssa, and thank you for everyone who joined us.
Thank
Well,
you,
thanks,
Joy.
Joy.
And thank you, Robert.
Thank you. Thanks, everybody. Have a great day.
Okay, thanks.